Good evening and welcome to a very special episode of the Schooner Pod. I'm Ty. Joining me tonight is Jamison. Our regular host Bobby I forgot where he said
He
he was,
abandoned
but
us.
he's not contributing to the episode tonight. Fortunately for all you Sooner fans out there, in the off season, since we're now in the off season, Bobby spent the entirety of the Schooner Pod's funds on one of those flashy memory erase devices from Men in Black. So Jamison and I have completely forgotten the pain of last season, and we are already in our optimism for 2025. But tonight we will be doing a retrospective of the position groups for 2024. So we're going to be going through in tier maker form per Bobby's request what we thought of all of these position groups after the conclusion of the 2024 season. So now we have hindsight to educate our uneducated opinions here. Jamison, thank you for joining me tonight.
As Ty knows, we started this 15 minutes late because I was in a fervor realizing that Bobby had prepared this graphic and this podcast for us to rank the position groups for the 2025 season. Not what I was under the impression to do. And so unfortunately, you will see a really bad graphic that I copied and pasted in from our 2023 version that we did of this, that a lot of it is cut off. I really hope Bobby listens to this tomorrow. Ty, we should just not tell him. Maybe you'll find out tomorrow.
He does do this thing, I'm starting to realize, where he tries to sabotage the podcast every time he's not on it. So that's the only reasonable conclusion here. But Jamison has stepped in and done some hard work on the thumbnail on YouTube and has produced this wonderful tier maker by just going to tiermaker.com and typing in some position groups. So but Jamison, you have anything else to intro us before we just dive right into to ranking these position groups?
I don't know if this is the content y'all want, guys, but this is content you're gonna get. And I think that it's a kind of a good way to look back at it now that I feel like you said, Ty, our emotions of last season have kind of went to the back of our minds. They're still kind of there if you think about it, but now we can think logically. Let's actually kind of give a tier to each position group that we had last year and see, maybe as we do this, we realize that our skill level on our roster wasn't as bad as we really thought it was.
Perhaps. I don't know. I don't know. You went on a whole crusade this season about how coaching didn't matter and skill level mattered a ton. And now you're saying that the skill of the players was great. So maybe just some sort of mysterious force caused us to not be great. But yeah, I think you said it best, Jamison, as we jump into this. Maybe this isn't the content that you guys want. Maybe this isn't the content that we want to make. This is really all we got. And this is what you're going to get. So you're going to like it.
So let's break this down. This is your tier maker. I feel like these were popular about 3 or 4 years ago. We're still doing them. Let's break down the tiers. So an S tier would be your top. I always thought that was like satisfactory, in school, whenever you got an S in class and you're like, it's either S or U. And it's like, just like, congratulations, here's your participation trophy. That's not the case here. S would be the top. What does even S stand for? Superior?
Superior, supreme, something like that. I would have to assume. It's certainly not satisfactory if it's above. Although I am kind of at the point where maybe we just need to binary SU all of these position groups. That might be the path going forward. But yeah, I don't think it's satisfactory. I think we'll say, I don't know, star level. Star level seems appropriate.
I think for here, that really makes a lot of sense for this context. And then going down the chart, you have an A would be essentially the second level down. Very, very respectable, good grading class. You're getting a 4.0, but you're not the top of the class. B's, obviously self-explanatory. C and D would be the lowest. We do not have F's on here, but if you're getting D's nowadays in school, I don't know how many programs, how many colleges are saying D's are passing nowadays, but usually you got to get C to pass. So D will be pretty much a failure for this position group.
So we're not going to fail. We're already saying from the start that we're not going to give anyone a straight F.
I mean, I'm sure there's some people we wanted to give a straight F.
All right. Well, you know what? I think ending it D is appropriate since we don't have coaching up here. So I think without further ado, we should just go ahead and jump into these beautifully centered, both horizontally and vertically.
And the great part about this is you're going to get rotating ads on the bottom of your screen that have nothing to do with this podcast. So let's talk about, I say we just start about quarterbacks, Ty. I
Yeah.
think that's just such an easy one to go after. So
Yeah.
S, A, B, C, D, we're ranking Jackson Arnold, Michael Hawkins, and
Casey Thompson.
I guess if you really wanted to, you can throw Casey Thompson. If Casey Thompson somehow changes your grade from a certain letter to another letter, I don't know what you're doing. But, Ty, what do you think the quarterbacks deserve?
Yeah,
as a
I'm
grade?
actually glad we're starting with quarterbacks because I feel like this is going to be a good benchmark. We can sort of establish, or I don't know, you're a man of science. Are we establishing our control here by demonstrating where we're going to place quarterbacks? I don't know what the appropriate term would be, but it's going to be a good benchmark.
It's a pretty good control variable.
I think you have to factor in to some extent expectations and ceiling. And you look at Jackson Arnold, 5-star, all the expectations that we had for him coming in, the fact that he wasn't even able to hold on to the starting job the entire season. Michael Hawkins obviously seemed pretty electric when he came in the Tennessee game, at least had a lot of fight in him, and that was a tough game for Jackson Arnold. But then, you know, his momentum kind of died out, and we saw that he wasn't necessarily as dynamic as we would expect. At one point, we tried Bauer Sharp. That was a non-starter as well at quarterback. We'll get to the tight ends here in a bit. But yeah, I think I have to give the quarterbacks, my vote would be D tier on
Yeah,
this, because I think
it's a D.
we expected them to be high B, if not low A, realistically. And just the way it panned out, I'm not saying this with malice towards, you know, either of the guys, but I think objectively it was a D tier performance, especially because the Oklahoma standard for quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think the way I'd parse it out is I think Michael Hawkins was a high C. I know there's a lot of hype for him going forward. I saw an edit today that was like, oh, remember whenever we had a disappointing quarterback? And it was like Trevor Knight. And then they were replaced by a transfer quarterback. And it was like John Mateer and as obviously Baker Mayfield. And then the young gun in waiting, and it was like Kyler Murray and Michael Hawkins. And I was like, bro, chill. like this guy's just as down bad in terms of off-season content as we are right now, Ty.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you, but we've progressed to the stage of getting our news from I saw an edit today.
But it's like okay, now let's pump the brakes. I think Michael Hawkins was fun for some moments and some big plays, but obviously he was extremely limited, and good defense could really scheme against him.
Mm-hmm.
Like in that Texas game, forced him rolling out to the right, and then we would have 2 or 3 seconds to throw, and our wide receivers would never get open. I think Hawkins has optimism for the future, but obviously he's very, very young. And so I would still give him a C for that. And I give Jackson Arnold the lowest of the low in terms of D because of expectations. Now, his performance, I still think was a C, but in expectations were out the roof, and unfortunately he plummeted. So I think D for quarterback is completely fair. If you wanted to convince me of C, Ty, I would have gone with you at C.
I
think D is fine.
Yeah, I would have thought C if we maybe knew all season Michael Hawkins was going to be the guy. Maybe Arnold got injured in the preseason or something like that. And then we knew to sort of temper expectations, and then you could build around that. But in conclusion on the quarterbacks, I think one thing that really pushes it into the D is the uncertainty, the fact that neither guy could really get a hold of the position and make it his own. The entire offense is then built around, because they're not interchangeable guys, necessarily one-to-one. You do have to change the offense. You do have to change your scheme with each guy. And I feel like that's just, we had to hit the reset button a couple times through the season because of them. So yeah, I'm very confident in D.
Yeah, I say you already brought this up, but let's go to the tight ends next. Another hot button thing that me and you like to argue about. So just for everyone's reminders, the tight ends were comprised of the wonderful Bauer Sharp, who's now at LSU, Jake Roberts, transferred in from Baylor, had some fun moments, had some sad moments, and then some guys at the bottom of the depth chart that we hope to make more appearances, but obviously injuries riddled them. Cade McIntyre, Caden Helms, amongst others. But really, we're breaking this down with the Bauer Sharp and Jake Roberts up at the top. I can go first since you went first last time on this one. I think it's a C. I'm going to be very nice. And Ty's over here cocking his head to the right, wondering
This is some sort of trap.
why is Jamison being so nice to the tight ends? I think Jake Roberts still had some fun plays. He had a couple of back shoulder passes. I know he had some drops, but he still had some big moments this year that we don't really think about as much at this point. Bauer Sharp, man, did announcers love to talk about him as being our leading receiver. But I mean, in terms of the stats and the respect that it garnered from opposing defenses, you still have to give him a little bit of a bump, even though he was a miserable thrower and making horrible decisions in the jet sweep. I think that's not on the same level as a quarterback this year, Ty. So that's why I have it as a C. But if you're a tight end hater, please prove me wrong.
I've got some important stats here. So
Okay.
First off, Jake Roberts and Bauer Sharp, 2 touchdowns apiece. That one actually surprised me because I thought certainly Bauer Sharp had a few more than Jake Roberts. They were equal on touchdowns. And Jake Roberts on, I think, 10 catches. He had a decent number of catches. Let's see, bad podcasting here. Yeah, 9.3 yards average. Bauer Sharp, 7.7. But this is foreshadowing for another position group. As you touched on, Bauer Sharp was our leading receiver. Do you know off the top of your head how many yards he had this year, Jamison?
Bauer?
Yes.
This is a fun
And I
game.
think he played in every game.
I'm going to guess 682.
He was our leading receiver, played in every single game. He had, for the year, 323 yards. So
that tells you how little that I can remember. 682 is so stupid.
No,
that is so stupid. I'm looking back at that
leading.
answer. That is like he's like averaging like 50 yards a game.
No,
that
this
is so
was not
stupid.
This was not a got you. This was not a got you for you, Jamison. This is, I want everyone to know, when we get to another position group, our leading receiver was a tight end with less than 350 yards, and he played in every game of the season. So we're just going to keep that in the back of our minds for when we talk about the receivers. But
Jesus
for me,
Christ.
the tight ends, I want to say D tier. I want to say they were worse. Yes,
Yeah.
Jake Roberts had some moments that were great. Yes, they had to get forced into some positions, maybe got overused because of Jackson Arnold or because of who knows what. There's maybe a conspiracy in there that with the offensive coordinator changeover, I know at one point there was a conspiracy that Joe John Finley maybe didn't understand what other position groups even did. So everything was just kind of centered around Jackson Arnold getting the ball to Sharp. But yeah, to me, I want to say D tier, but we didn't have tremendously high expectations for them going into the season. So yeah, I could be okay with C tier as well if we factor in the fact that we pretty much expected them to be kind of subpar either way.
Screw it. I think it's fun. Put them in the D. Put them in the D tier. I was being nice. Transition to the wide receiving core, Ty, because I guess we were kind of bringing that up. Let's bring back.
This?
Say that again.
Do you want me to go first on the receiver?
Well, yeah. I'll kind of break down kind of this wide receiving room because if you look at the depth chart, like I've just got the depth chart that was released for Game 4 of Tennessee up just to kind of help me for reference. All of these guys just trash on here. Now, none of them are actually playing. Like Tennessee depth chart, kind of lends us a hand at JJ Hester, wide receiver 1, Brennan Thompson, Zion Kearney, Zion Reagans, Jacob Jordan's a little bit of a star and a bright moment throughout all of this. He wasn't on the depth chart at the Tennessee, but I mean, obviously that's someone that you got to talk about in this wide receiver room. Ty, I think that if we have already hinted at it already, what do you think of this wide receiver group?
I don't like this there's so much we could do an entire podcast just slicing into how could you fairly grade this wide receiver room if you were to start to factor in all of the injuries and everything else. But at the end of the day, what matters is what did this position group, in my mind, right? I think I'm blinding this to players. I'm just looking at what this position group, what did they produce for the year? And to me, that's D tier. I don't think
it's
right?
not even a question.
And it's unfortunate because there was a lot of young guys, that, like we said, people that weren't even on the depth chart ended up as starters throughout the season because of injuries and everything else. But there's a lot of ways to slice it. I go back to the bowl game and I see guys who are, yes, true freshmen, but 4-star recruits, and they're not making true freshman mistakes like, oh, he missed, an assignment here, or oh, he ran the wrong route, or oh, he lined up incorrectly. Like 4-star true freshman, perfectly catchable throw, hits both hands, and then we drop it, and that happens multiple times. Is like, I think about things like that, and then I think about, maybe some people that were in the wide receiver room didn't even want to play this year, and maybe had a 2-week, 3-week injury that somehow lasted the entire fall semester of school, things like that. So
that's a controversial statement.
I think D tier for me.
Was it the doctor's fault or was it the patient's fault? The classic question that I will stay out of. But yeah, totally. I think D and wide receivers being a D is probably the easiest thing here. Their inability to get open and bail out the quarterback, and in the early part of the year, the offensive line made things look even worse than we thought that they were. A wide receiver who can get open quick is a quarterback's best friend. And we did not have anyone off the line of scrimmage who got off quick. You notice that I said in this wide receiver preview, I didn't even bring up Deion Burks' name. I didn't even bring up, Did I even bring up Nick Anderson's name?
No.
Honestly, for the majority of the season, we didn't have them. And it's crazy that whenever I bring up the wide receiving room, that I'm not even mentioning them. And that shows you even more in terms of expectations. We thought in the preseason that this wide receiving group could be one of the deepest and one of the most talented in college football. Jaden Gibson goes down. We start saying, that's a big hit. We didn't really have a lot of guys like that. That might kind of take a hit to our depth. Nick Anderson, Deion Burks. We start to see the people get injured. Andrell Anthony. And we're like, you know what? This wide receiver room is not deep. Everyone's saying it was deep, including us, was completely wrong. And you cannot expect true freshmen to go out there and be that dude. And it just was a disaster. I don't think anything other than a D for this one is acceptable.
Yeah. Do you know how many receptions that Jaleel Farouk, Andrell Anthony.
It didn't even say Farouk's name either. That's another thing. That's crazy.
Well, so Nick Anderson has 0 catches this year.
Yeah.
Obviously some injuries and stuff there. And then, it's just Andrell Anthony had 1 catch for 4 yards.
Yeah. So how many catches did Jaleel get? Is that the question?
Farouk had 3. I was going to say,
yeah, I was going to say
Farouk and Nick combined, but
yeah, it's just, I mean, I had high hopes for Farouk and what he could have done if he'd have stayed healthy. Nick Anderson, the same. Andrew Anthony, I don't know how much of his injury course and having to get a cleanup surgery was optimistic for this season, but all in all, we can talk really bad about this wide receiver group, but I don't think it's their fault. Quarterback room, I think it was their fault. Tight end group, I think that they could have been better. Wide receivers, I think I could give them a free pass because there was a lot of injuries and a lot of situation around them that did not help them at all and put people into positions that should not have been in that position.
Yeah, I don't disagree. It's not. I don't want to necessarily fault any individuals, but it's still D tier. So D tier without malice, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yes. We're
D tier
sorry.
with our sympathies, but you know, it's like the late great Judge Smalls from Caddyshack once said, "I didn't want to do it, but I felt I owed it to him, so we're
I
gonna
feel
put him
like
in
we
D."
get a Caddyshack reference on this podcast now every couple of months.
Yeah, I would say and say that's probably the average. There's just so many
Yeah.
opportunities. So
I say we transition, just do the whole offense. This is really crappy, guys. We just hit 3 D tiers in a row. I'm going to put one up here that I do not think should be a D tier, and I don't think should be in the conversation for D tier. But maybe in the preseason, a lot of people said that this one position probably was one of the lowest, and that was the offensive line. I think at the beginning of the year, there were a lot of holes. If you're just talking about what we are trotting out there at the beginning of the season, for example, like I told you, this is the Tennessee depth chart. I feel like this was a huge turning part in our season, so that's why I have this one pulled up for reference. Left tackle was Tarquin. Left guard was Sexton. Hickman / Everett or Bates on the depth chart for center. Wee at the right guard, and then Jake Taylor or Spencer Brown at the right tackle. That ended up changing, and we get Logan Howland at the left tackle, who had some tough moments, then really kind of came into things. Heath Ozida, same kind of story. Maybe not as big of a jump as Tarquin at the end of the season, but still showed some good things. Troy Everett coming back from injury and really being more of a stalwart than we were thought we were going to get from Branson Hickman. We will continue to be his slow self, but could have been worse. And then right tackle is kind of a hodgepodge of group of people, but Spencer Brown actually held his own for the last 2 games. Okay. I think the way that this offensive line group worked at the end of the season, the way we got to watch some of the young guys grow, I think that right there is a beat. Now, I think that the performance that they had near the beginning of the season, where there was a lot of miscues, and then the beginning of Logan Howland and his slow step off the offensive line, and Heath Ozida and his mishaps, and Spencer Brown was pitiful, and Branson Hickman not being the guy that we thought he was going to be. I think that's C. So I will defer to you, Ty. Where do you think they are? B, C.
I do you know off the top of your head how many different combinations of O line we ended up with?
How the hell am I supposed to know that off the top of my head?
It's if anyone would know, it would be you because you're a big line guy, and I know that what was it the first 6 games? It was a different combination every time, and I know
Yeah.
we stabilized for like a 2 or 3 game period, but I want to say off the top of my head, I remember seeing it was something like 10 different combinations
I
of
bet you it's more
starters.
than that.
Obviously, people plug in, sub in and out during the games, but
Maybe not. Maybe that's about right.
yeah, I want to say of will we play 13 games? I
Yeah.
want to say it was 13 games, 10 different starter combinations, 9 or 10, something like that. Obviously, the bowl
Mhm.
game is going to skew that a lot too, because the nature of bowl games nowadays. But yeah, I you'd have to really sell me on B tier. It's one of those. It's kind of hard to tell because the quarterbacks were so bad that it. Like I feel like you could maybe make the line seem worse. I guess we're going to talk about the running backs next, so that's a good tie-in. But I think C again without I don't have any sort of like ill feelings.
That's fair.
Um, you'd have to really sell me on really making me think that we expected them to be just terrible preseason.
Because we
And
kinda
then,
did, though. Not, like, terrible, terrible, but, like, kind of
yeah,
the thing that would push us down and, we were saying, like, "Oh, we think that we could have a chance in the SEC, but what's gonna hurt me is this inexperienced offensive line."
yeah, I think we probably expected them to be a C. We expected the quarterback to be like an A. I think
Yep.
realistically, we expected receivers to be an A for sure, if not
Yeah.
S.
Even an S, yeah.
Um, And then tight ends, we probably expect it to be a B or C. We probably expect it to be a C with a ceiling.
I don't know. Do you remember how
realistic.
much hype we had for Bauer Sharp in the preseason? Like, we heard that he was just a workaholic. He was dominating in spring practices. Like, this was a type of dude, a converted quarterback into a tight end. Everyone loves that kind of thing.
We heard the same thing about, Taylor Tatum.
Yeah.
But you never know.
I guarantee you that we're going to find someone here. Let's say, close our eyes. It's going to be a month and a half, and we're going to be preparing for the spring game. Just wait. It's going to be somebody.
No, anything can happen. This is certainly not indicative of what we're going to see from this 2025 team. But yeah, I think C for the O-line. I could be sold on B, but I was not sold just
I
then.
think C is
I'd have to
fair
really, really be sold on B.
Because the way they started this season was so glaringly poor, and Bill Bedenbaugh's patience with them was incredibly thin of how much he was substituting in and out, that I think that a B is maybe a little bit too high. So I think that's fair. The way that they ended the season, though, does make me feel good.
I think they certainly had moments. They definitely had moments where, if we just looked at that one game, that they would rank in the B for sure, if not A, for like little moments. But yeah, I think C's an average.
Cool. All right, running backs, Ty. Let's just rattle off the running backs that were making an appearance for us this season. Javonte Barnes was the guy who became the lead back, the alpha in the running back room. And then Taylor Tatum really started to make his way until he started having ball security issues. Gavin Sawchuk was a guy we thought would have a bigger role, had a little bit in the bowl game, is coming back. And then we can't talk about this running back room without talking about the last couple games of the season and how Xavier Robinson took over and really helped us win the Alabama game, gave us a good fight in the Missouri game. His story will not be talked about enough from this season.
Also registering rush attempts this season was Bauer Sharp with 2 for -8 yards.
Congratulations, Bauer Sharp.
He does it all. He's hurting the quarterback stats. He's hurting the tight end stats. He somehow hurt the receivers by being his only good stat category, and now he's hurting the running backs. It's really, and if we really analyze blocking on the line, he would hurt that group too. So he really is a sort of a inverse Heisman in what he did for this team.
The inverse Heisman.
That
sounds like an award that would be paired with, the award whenever it's like who got the most arrest from the season. We should have one of those. It's like the hater ceremony. Like we got the NFL award ceremony on tonight. Let's just do a hater ceremony for college football.
Yeah, the Fulmer Cup, as some call it, for winning the most. There's a points-based system that people do on Reddit for sort of most off-season arrests and everything else. And then if you combine that, because this does have an OU tie in here. If you combine the Fulmer Cup, the most arrests during the offseason and season, with a national championship, then you achieve what's known as the Switzer sweep in honor of Barry Switzer and his OU teams in the 80s. I want to say Urban Meyer at both Ohio State and Florida was the last to do it. But it's, truly an amazing feat. I completely lost my train of thought here. Yeah,
running backs.
Not necessarily inverse Heisman, but I would say Bauer Sharp is like, this is the video game NCAA, and Bauer Sharp was the player character, and the player was atrocious. That's really the only explanation for how we got in every position group. But yeah, the backs, I think, what do we expect them to be in the preseason?
I think that was a big question mark. We had some guys that we thought could be solid, but at the same time, we had some concerns. We didn't see a clear alpha in the room. We thought it could have been Gavin Sawchuk. We started to hear some rumblings in the preseason that Javonte Barnes might actually be that dude, but based off 2 seasons ago now, we were quite skeptical because we thought that maybe after his injury, he had kind of taken a step down. We thought Taylor Tatum would be fun, but he's a true freshman and was a late enrollee. So obviously, even though there's some hype there, you've got to kind of, temper your expectations. No one was talking seriously. Maybe a couple people were talking about X, but I think there was a big question mark. And I think in terms, if we're taking expectations into account here, I feel like that should really impact this grade.
Yeah, I don't. Gosh, I'll just cards on the table. I could probably be convinced of C again, like the linemen, if you just really, really sold me on we expected them to be atrocious, but I kind of want to lean towards D, especially
Really?
if we're gonna say
Really?
that if we're gonna say the O line was C, right? If we really start to look at like I don't know, Jackson
I
Arnold
think
had the
I
most
think I think
carries.
running backs like a tier above offensive line. Like the way Xavier Robinson played in that Alabama game and absolutely took over at the end. From what we saw and how much effort Javante Barnes took and made a big leap this year, I feel like those two alone bump it up. Like
I
it's
feel like
I
we're
thought I feel like the Taylor Tatum fumbling is gonna throw it into the trash, but I for what we thought this running back room was gonna be and what this offensive line gave them, especially at the beginning of the season, I think there was a point in this season where all we had was Javante Barnes. I think it's a B.
I don't know. I guess I could be sold on B if we're saying that we're so I think we might be looking at this differently. Like I'm
Mhm.
looking at where would I put this running back room on a tier maker of like all running back rooms in college football this past season. And I would certainly put them in the bottom, was that fifth tier
Mm,
of the nation? Maybe not
yeah.
of the nation is not fair. Of like Big Ten and SEC, I would put them in the bottom, sort of fifth tier. But
I see that
I could,
perspective.
yeah, we could throw B up there, so we're not being. I don't want the final screenshot to be like. I mean, the defense we'll get into here in a
I
second.
think I just think Xavier Robinson's performance near the end of the season and the way he just took over that's the reason it's
Yeah,
being my heart.
guys did step up. This is another one we could sort of dig into. What was the actual cause here? Because we did see a lot of potential from Tatum, right? We heard a bunch of great stuff on. I called him out early in the season or preseason. Actually, he was my sort of expected breakout star. Obviously, the ball security was an issue, but yeah, we did see really impressive individual performances. So yeah, I'll go B. We'll say B.
All right, let's take it. All right, Ty, give me a defensive position group and go after it. I'll let you pick.
Let's start. Let's do. Let's start with the D line.
Okay, D line. So let's kind of go through the defensive line here. This is an all-encompassing of the defensive ends and the D tackle, nose tackle. We're gonna throw that cheetah position into the linebackers, I believe.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
don't
that's
have
it.
outside and inside there, but we'll just kind of throw that position into there. Um, Defensive ends, just breaking those down in the same group. You think Ethan Downs on one side, R. Mason Thomas on the other side. R. Mason Thomas was a lot of fun. And then guys that were depth pieces there. I feel like Trace Ford had some good moments in here. Caden Wooler did a couple of things here and there. The defensive tackle, Jaden Jackson, as a true freshman, was an absolute blessing. And then Grayson Halton really made a step up whenever we thought that maybe it's been his calling for a while now, and he did it in his junior season. Then Dominic Williams and DJ Terry at that nose tackle position as well. They had great seasons. Ty, do you want me to go first or would you like to go first?
I want you to go first, but I want to mention real quick why I picked the D line here. I think this is going to be like we talked about with the quarterbacks. I don't think they're going to be D tier unless this goes off the rails here. Jamison might have some very convincing
How
arguments.
the hell would I put this as a D
No,
tier, Ty?
I think what I meant to say was I think this is going to be a good benchmark for the rest of the defense. I think this was not the best, not the worst. I think this was a sort of the average of the defense. Not saying that's good or bad. You guys will see what we think of that here in a second. But I think this is really going to inform our opinions of the other three defensive position groups. Is why I've chosen
Yeah,
it.
I think it's an A. I think this defensive line was an A.
Hmm.
I know. Oh, I surprised you there, didn't I? Yeah,
That's a little aggressive. That's
I
maybe a
can
little.
hear I can hear an argument for a B, but R. Mason Thomas straight up won us games in fourth quarters. He would just turn on the turbojets in obvious passing down situations. That dude cooked. Whenever he knew that quarterback was going back to pass, he's cooking, and he won us games and closed out games in the fourth quarters, which really makes you hopeful for next year. And Ethan Downs is just such a solid presence that like you can't really fault him at all there. Jaden Jackson was stellar as a guy that doesn't show up in the box charts, but was really, really good as a true freshman. And then, Grayson Halton kicked ass on getting sacks. I don't have really much bad to say about this defensive line group. Really what it comes down to is the disappointment in terms of like, if you thought PJ Adebaware was going to take a big step this year, maybe you were disappointed there and saying like, oh, these 5-star talents should be at least showing something in their sophomore season. And then maybe like you expected more out of like a Caden Woolard, but really in reality, I was really happy with it. So, I mean, tell me your argument for it.
Yeah. So let me say this. I was pulling up the defensive stats here as we were talking. And when I looked at the D line, I think it's funny because my initial reaction was that we were probably going to have them A or B was going to be kind of the deciding point. And I thought that maybe you would go an A, but I thought that you'd probably throw a B up there. But certainly, if we're going to say the running backs were B tier, but when I actually look at the stats, actually a lot better than I was even remembering. Guys like R. Mason Thomas, 13 tackles for loss, 9 sacks is really, really great stats. A pass deflected, 2 fumble recoveries, 2 fumbles forced. That's just R. Mason Thomas alone. Like it's so many. I don't know. I mean, the D line created 2, 4, 6, almost a dozen fumbles on their own out of the 15 that we had this year. Is I think absolutely A tier. When I really look at the stats, it speaks more. And I do. I think back to, I would have loved more pressure, but I think everyone would have always loved more pressure from their lines. I think A tier is very fair. Very fair.
I think at the bottom of the A is fine with that. Yeah, I agree with you, Ty. I think a more potent pass rush for someone other than R. Mason Thomas would be needed. That's maybe like a guy into next year where I feel like there's been a lot of hype, and then Curtis Lofton talking about Danny Okoye being that one guy that he'd expect to take the big next step and be that dude. You could hope that PJ could make a step into the next season. I feel like this team can step their defensive line up to the next level if they have a second pass rusher on the other side of R. Mason Thomas, and it could be one of those 2 guys that we developed, or it could be transfers, Marvin Jones Jr. So, but this is not an episode of tier ranking the 2025 team.
That's what I was about to say. I was waiting on you to stop so I could say, Bobby, when you're listening to this back, I just want to confirm that Jamison is ranking them in A tier based on 2025 future potential. But no, I think
I get Bobby thinking that this was that, but I mean, and we still got spring to go through. Let's let us save us for that.
To cap off the D line, and just at this point, we're sort of I don't know why I cannot speak today. We're sort of just gaming the game at this point. But if OU's 2024 running back room was a B tier, then I cannot put that D line in the B tier. The D line was absolutely at least a tier above what the running backs were.
Yeah.
So go ahead and give me A very firmly for the D line.
I completely agree with that too. I feel like the running backs are a really, really hard thing to grade because there's some lows and there's some highs.
And again, not with no malice towards the running backs, or we didn't have like an individual just super high expectations that was being atrocious. It's just a bunch of really young guys, bunch of developing guys that were really struggling with, turnover in the OC position, and then, quarterback. And we had, very, very one faceted offense for a lot of the season that certainly did not help the running backs either. So, but yeah, the D line, absolutely A tier.
All right. I say we go into linebackers now. We can just kind of go through the
I,
levels of the
you want to
defense.
keep the linebackers?
Okay, sure. Want to
I
talk
would. I just.
about
Yeah. I
want to talk
want to.
about safeties?
We can do safeties. Let's do safeties.
Safeties? Okay, let's talk about safeties. I feel like safeties is a group that we have given S tier for multiple tier maker sessions in the past, and we love to talk about. And obviously, there were some high expectations coming into the season. Billy Bowman on one side, Peyton Bowen and Robert Spears Jennings on the other, and then having some of the young guys that showed some good things, Boganowski earlier in the year, Jaden Hardy, Reggie Powards. But really, those first three names that I said at the safety were really important in terms of how we were going to do as a team this season. I think those three guys right there, super skillful, super good. Expectation, S. I don't think they were S explicitly, but I'm not disappointed in them, and I still think they played really good. I think Billy Bowman has proved himself that he could be a big time contributor in the NFL the way he consistently played. Um, but was he the guy making the pick six versus Kansas State like he had done in the past and winning us games on his own? No, because that shouldn't be expected as a safety every single season. Safeties are usually, for their word, there should be a safety. They're not usually the biggest difference maker. Um, so I think safeties are an A in my opinion because of the skill that they brought. And the expectations I had were very, very high. But in terms of expectations, just a nudge below.
Yeah, I think we've always been. I think if we're looking at these safeties and saying, "Oh, preseason we could have predicted S tier," uh, I don't think it was unrealistic, but I think it may be in retrospect a bit unfair. We kind of expected at least two of those guys, if not three, to really be performing at a level where you would see them playing on Sundays and starting on Sundays, and that's just not necessarily that fair, and that's not realistic, I think, to what we had and defensively, not the personnel side, but what we had defensively, just sort of the hands that we were dealt. But I think I don't know. I'm leaning towards A.
Mhm.
Um,
They're
I think
not running
I
back
think pretty
level.
firmly A. Yeah, no, they're not. I would not have them in B.
I think
B.
us putting running backs at B will spook us from putting any of the defensive members
Yeah,
at B.
for the record, I wanted them in. I wanted the running backs in D, but I didn't want to be too negative.
Jeez Louise. You just Taylor Tatum broke your heart, didn't he?
They were better than the O line, which is
Yeah.
just I don't
And I
know.
would also like to apologize with this graphic that I've used for a long time, and I know this has pissed off some people. You may see apostrophe S's. People may not like that. I apologize. Nothing I'm going to do about it now. It is the TE apostrophe S's. It's the tight ends ranking is what this is. This is not the tight ends plural. It's the tight ends ranking. Is that fair, Ty?
I suppose, except
Okay.
for except for quarterback. Anyway, I will say
Whenever I
I
first
really
made this, Ty, I think it was just Dylan Gabriel and
it was
Dylan
just
Gabriel
Dylan
only.
Gabriel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I did want to mention I had a talking point that I just remembered that I was looking for a chance to use all season, and I just forgot or never had a good chance. But I'm sure it was very confusing for people who don't watch OU, like fans of other teams and stuff like that, listening to broadcasts and trying to decipher between Bowen, and Bowman is was a very confusing sort of safety names to have. So maybe that helped us in some sense.
Hmm.
Maybe there was a team. We didn't play Oklahoma State this year, but some team like Oklahoma State that would have been confused by that.
Let's talk about Eli Bowen. Let's talk about the cornerback room. I feel like Eli Bowen, in terms of expectations and what you got out of it, was astronomical. In terms of, we talk about most improved player award, he was a true freshman. I get that. But in terms of most improved, in terms of what we thought he was going to be at the beginning of the season, what he was, and what he was at the end of the season,
It's
most
not
improved through the
improved.
season.
I don't think that's
Sorry.
what improvement is. But
Most surprising player on the team was Eli Bowen. I think that I can put my foot down on that one and say absolutely. We did not think a 5'9" cornerback would go out and be our alpha at cornerback one. We thought that could have been Woody Washington. seems like Woody Washington never really found his place, and Ty, as being a hater of Woody Washington, finally came and got his crown. Other guys like Kenai Walker and Des Malone played okay at times, but were they stars? No. Eli really had great PFF ratings and really challenged other teams. I think cornerbacks should be the lowest ranking group of the defense, but I'll let Ty give me his ranking first.
Yeah, I want to say that they are B tier, and this
Mm-hmm.
goes back to what I was saying with the D line. I thought they would be sort of our average or our benchmark, and the cornerbacks were certainly the position group in my mind that was going to be the one that would fall below them. So again, some unfortunate situations that the entire defense had to face, and again, this is with no malice or sort of hater or anything towards any one of the cornerbacks. We didn't have a situation where a guy was just constantly getting burned. Like no one in that room was a oh no, like absolute liability. He's going to get cooked all the time. It was they were doing the best they could with the cards that they were dealt, and they did a commendable job. And I think it wasn't below average, but it wasn't exceedingly above average, particularly for this defense. So I think B tier for the cornerbacks is a very fair, very reasonable grade.
Yeah.
It's not on the tier maker. We'll say B plus to put them above the running backs. But
Eli put him up to a high A by himself, but then the other guys kind of pushed him down to the B. I think what Eli did was absolutely astounding. And as OU fans, what we got from this freshman class, we should be really excited moving forward because we've got a lot of dudes that did a lot for us as true freshmen. I think that some people thought that maybe this freshman class last year would be good. We had some guys out there that showed us they're pretty great. But like kind of I said earlier, Woody Washington's disappointment, really, he was a C. Des Malone and Kenai Walker, maybe high C's and B's. Peyton Bowen or Eli Bowen was an A. I think throwing it out of B is a totally reasonable rating. Last one, Ty, the linebackers. And I think this is a fun one to talk about and obviously something that we're pretty passionate about. Danny Stutzman, the leader of this team, far and away. A guy that we thought could win the Buckets this year. Unfortunately, he didn't. But still, an absolutely stellar guy and a stellar season. And then you talk about at the wheel next to him, Kip Lewis, and what he did with his Kip sixes this year were astounding. Behind him, Kobe McKenzie really was doing his thing. It was a great top three for an inside linebacking group. Lewis Carter, RIP, still showed some moments. Beginning of the season, Kendall Dolby looked to be that dude and obviously had his injury. And then we kind of had at the Cheetah different flavors of cheetahs, whether that be a Sammy Omosigo, couple, maybe Woody Washington a little bit, couple of the DBs moving down. What would you take? And I think that the cheetah position might bring down this linebackers rating a little bit, which is a shame. What would you give the linebackers overall?
I'm not gonna degrade the linebacker ranking in my mind because of the cheetahs. Maybe in retrospect we made the wrong decision to include them because I think tier wise they probably do fit with the D line a little bit better. But I think realistically that to me is if you had to say like decision, is this a linebacker or is this an O lineman? I think they are more linebacker-ish. But yeah, I want to mention some stats first before I tell you. But if we're looking at combined tackles, we have Lewis Carter 23, go up a little bit. Kobe McKenzie 10th on the team with 30. A lot of the D-backs in there. Kip Lewis 65. Danny Stutzman leading the team. So second on the team for combined tackles was Robert Spears Jennings with 66. Danny Stutzman had 109 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, only 1 sack, which is kind of surprising. I thought that he had more than that, but 44 solo tackles, also led the team, played in 12 games, a guy that probably could have gone to the draft. Well, not probably, could have gone to the draft last year. real quick, do you think he helped or hurt his stock, or do you think it was I think it was maybe kind of a wash?
If you had to make me pick a side, I'd say negative just because he lost a year of his life.
That is true.
People always say in terms of shelf life in the NFL, they would take a guy younger. And I don't know if what he put on tape is any different than what he did in the last season. So I would say just a net negative, but slightly. I don't think in terms of draft position, you're going to see much of a difference because there's going to be a team who fall in love with who he is, and you get him in a room and he interviews. There's going to be a team that's going to draft him over his ADP.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, look forward to what he does on the Jags, but I think
Why would you do that to him?
I don't know. I don't know why I said
First
that.
of all, I think that was a really, really good stray at the Jags. And
It's a stray.
honestly, all OU fans can be like, "Ugh, I do not want that. I do not want him with the Jags.
If
I don't
there's
like the way the
if
Jags see."
there's somehow a world where he could get to Tampa Bay, that will be amazing.
That would be pretty
Just
fun.
him and Baker on the same team. Although I could see that going toxic somehow, and that would be
No,
honestly kind
how?
of hilarious too. I don't know. I don't know. I just
Huh.
think I
No
don't know.
way. They love
We'll
Oklahoma
do
too
an
much.
off-season pod on a Baker Danny Stutzman Civil War.
Bad
But
take.
I
I'm a
think
bad take.
I don't know. I don't know where. I don't know. You're letting me get off the cuff here,
Okay.
but I
Back
think
to what we were thinking the linebackers were.
linebackers S tier.
S tier.
Here's my thing. I
I think
want
you
to
can't
give
do that
someone
because
the
the
S.
Cheetahs, this is unfortunate.
I want to give someone the S, and were they at least a tier better than the D line? I think so. Were they at least a tier better than the safeties? I think so. Is some of that our scheme? Yes. Is some of that just the hype and sort of unintentional marketing around Danny Stutzman and around the rest of these linebackers? Also, yes. I
Yeah.
think as a position group, right? Maybe you want to see a little bit more performance in the stats lines from some of these guys as compared to some of the defensive backs and everything else. But I think we had some tremendous defensive backs. So I think without here's a hypothetical for you. Would you be opposed to B tiering the linebackers if they didn't have Danny Stutzman?
No, because Kip Lewis played so good this year.
So you still think it's an A without Danny Stutzman?
Okay, you really just set me up for the slam dunk to put him into S right there.
I'm not gonna lie, that's not even what I was trying to. I don't know what I was trying to do, really, but this did line up perfectly.
I
For
walked
the
right into
so
that trap because I was gonna say they're an A. I just think that the
let's
deficiencies at
go
the
ahead.
cheetah position,
Go ahead, put him
you
in the
can't
S.
ignore that after Kendall Dolby left. We
But
had to really scheme our defense around not having Kendall. But I think if you threw the cheetahs out of this, just for the sake of this, talk, having
I think
Danny
if
as
you put the
leader,
cheetahs with the D line is still A, correct?
maybe not.
Mm,
I don't know. Maybe close. It'd be close. You're right. It'd be more of an argument to be. Uh, I don't know. The poor cheetahs. That really does. For the sake of it, let's just throw the cheetahs out. Let's talk inside linebackers, and I can hop with you here. Inside linebackers were an S. Kip Lewis in the Kip Six was the absolute electric one thing this season. There's two things this season. The Alabama win and then the Kip Six. That really made things wonderful. And you got to love that the way this guy is growing. Danny Stutzman, I will say, we talk about him and how great he is. We talked about expectations, Ty. Did he meet, exceed, or go below expectation? I think he went slightly below because I thought that he was going to be the guy, the favorite to win the Butkus Award, and that wasn't him.
I think he met expectations. This is going to be hard for I could see why some OU fans would argue this, and in other contexts, I would argue this as well. I think the defense around him stepped up to a point where it sort of degraded his stats to an extent. It's
Yeah,
harder to be a star that shines so bright when the other stars around you are also shining a little bit brighter. And
yeah,
I think that he, in my mind, he met the expectations that I wanted from him. we definitely saw an improved D line from last year. And I understand, right? 2023, we won 10 games. We won 6 this year. But I think the D line was better this year than it was last year. And I think the safeties, I don't know. Because I think we S tiered them. So I'm not going to get into that. But I think the other linebackers also stepped up. And I think it hurts you a little bit in those big award ceremonies where people that don't watch you are just looking at stats and then just
Oh,
looking at your
and
team's
win
profile.
loss
Yeah.
with defensive too. I think that the majority of voters really don't have a good pulse of
No,
who's a
they're
good
casuals.
defender. And you see that in professional and college voting, probably
Yeah.
even more in college voting. People go with the trend, and people, especially on the defense side of the ball, are going to go for a winning team unless there is a guy who's a Superman hyped up player. A
Yeah.
linebacker, we didn't have that this season. We had some good linebackers out in college football. We didn't have any guy that was at the level of hype of, Travis Hunter at the cornerback position, right? Or
Yeah.
Abdul Carter at the defensive end position for Penn State. You just didn't have that as an inside linebacker. So Danny could have been that. If Oklahoma was a 10-win team and went to the playoffs, he wins it far and away. If he put up the same stats, guaranteed, because
Yeah.
his personality would have caught fire. It was catching fire at the beginning of the season. I think ESPN was doing a good job of pumping that. But unfortunately, we didn't meet the bill, and that's what our expectations of him were going to say are lower because he didn't win awards when we thought he would. But maybe that's more of a fault towards the offense and the team of Oklahoma rather than him himself.
Yeah, I think I do think the team sort of let him down there. So again, that's my pitch for linebackers S tier. I
I
think that's
think
kind
I
of
think with the Kip sixes, and then the way Danny is as a player, the depth that we have with Kobe McKenzie and Lewis Carter, and we can close our eyes and forget the rule that we place with the Cheetahs here. I can agree with you. Let's put the linebackers at S's, just knowing that if the Cheetahs were in there by principle, if I had to be a rule stickler, I do not think that they'd be an S. But inside linebackers, I applaud you. You were a stellar part of the season.
And Kip especially because it proves that Brent Venables can at least a little bit recruit defensive players and isn't just relying on Alex Grinch recruits like Danny Stutzman.
That's actually hilarious. Billy Bowman, Danny Stutzman, they were not Brent Venables guys, and
They were in fact Alex Grinch recruits. So maybe we fired him too soon. Well, we didn't fire him, but we should have brought him back.
If we put Cheetahs in one position group, I would put them at a C. I would say
Cheetahs on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not gonna I think most like casual fans don't really fully understand what exactly they are and what the point is, myself included. So
I was about to say, where do we fall in this
I don't
casual
fully
part?
know. Maybe B, but C for Cheetah, I suppose.
Kendall Dolby at the beginning of the season was better than a C.
I'm
Unfortunately,
gonna be honest. Again, the running backs being in B is just throwing it all off. I cannot put the Cheetahs below the running backs.
I see what you're talking about, but I could. There was not a Xavier Robinson or a Javante Barnes at the Cheetah position this year. Kendall Dolby
Because
played good at the beginning
everyone
of the
else
season.
on the defense was pretty good, though.
Yeah, but I feel like the Cheetah was a problem. That's just me, though. The Cheetah is supposed to be a position that shines, and I feel like that we really struggled to not have a guy there.
I gotta say, if the running backs look the same, have the same eye test and the same stats as they do this year, but the rest of the offense meets expectations, the running backs will be a D tier on this tier maker.
Okay. I get this as a polarizing thing. If you wanted to put running backs at C, that's fine. I just can't get that.
No. I hate doing the moving after. I hate the haggle.
We're not going to. No,
let's
let's just cut it off right now. We've already we're at 59 and a half in terms of minutes. Let's just kind of read back it through. Let's start at the bottom because that's what we do here at OU. We be pessimistic. Quarterbacks are a D tier. Other ones in the D tiers, tight ends, wide receivers. Moving up to the C tier, that's offensive line. The B tier, we have running backs and cornerbacks. The A, we have defensive line and safeties. And we decided to put the inside linebackers at superior, at the S tier. all in all, looking at this list and we breaking this down, going through, does this give you more hope or less hope for the season moving forward?
The linebackers, some of the youth in the defense is certainly optimistic. Some of the youth in the running backs, although I was slighting them most of the podcast, is optimistic to me. But I don't know. I wouldn't say I'm
Yeah.
tremendously hopeful for.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing anything up here that's going to change.
Big
Um,
applause to our defense. You tried your hardest this year. I had a lot of crazy takes about y'all this year and how they deserved no criticism, even though they did some bad things because I was so pissed off with the offense. Do you remember after the Texas game, I said, I don't want to hear a lick from anyone criticizing the defense, and I
maybe.
got burned for it. Yeah, we've blocked out a lot of these memories, but I think that the defense should get a round of applause. The offense, screw it. Let's move on. You got anything else, Ty?
No, I mean, what's done is done. And this is more about, again, this is sort of putting the blinders on and looking at position groups on their own. And I think when you do that, it does make the groups look maybe a little better than what the team added up to be. But yeah, I think we did a pretty good job. I think this is the most balanced that I've ever seen one of these that we've done. So
Honestly.
I'm pretty proud of us here. It's a little more contentious when we get into stuff like food that we do the tier makers on, but
Yeah.
I think that is about all we have for tonight. Thank you so much, everyone who listened this far through, um or just anyone who skipped around just to see where things were placed. If you think we did a bad job, please let us know in the comments. Jamison
And
and
at
Bobby,
Bobby Howard OK on X if you have any disagreements with our rankings.
that is true. Please add him on X. He pays for it, so we want him to get his money's worth, because he pays for that free app for, we're not going to speculate as to why. It could be political reasons, it could not be, I don't know. But with that, I think that's all we have tonight. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next week, unless I just caused you to not listen to us anymore.
All right. Bye, guys.
You got anything else, James?
No, bye.